Abby and Krista, thanks for being back on the retail series on Business of Cannabis. It's good to see you both like this.
It's great to see you. I'm really excited that Abby's here.
Yeah, me too.
I'm excited to be here again.
And as those that are in the room obviously know, Usama from Ronin Cannabis was very kind to both of you and the companies you work for. He obviously knew you were coming up next, but also he uses the data and insights that Headset provides to him and has access to on the sort of what kinds of things to carry and how things are going, and also Krista with you, sort of how the shop to set up and a lot of things to think about. We're going to dive a little bit into it right now, and I want to start with you, Abby. So thinking about sort of, I'm a retailer, I have Headset, like, what type of tools do you guys provide to retailers to help them make really important decisions about like what to carry?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. And I think it speaks to two different aspects of our platform. One being Retailer Pulse, our no cost model, kind of starts you in that idea of maintaining your lean inventory, right? With your stock coverage ratio, understanding based on the trailing 60 days, how much usually sells in a week, how much you should be reordering for the next week. But then you really get to 6, 9, maybe 12 months down the road, and you start thinking about scaling your SKUs back a little bit. I think the average retailer in Ontario carries about 270 SKUs, but you really want to take a look at what's contributing to your top revenue, right? Like what's actually providing your store growth, and really focusing on those SKUs, and maybe what we say is cutting the fat a little bit on either. I think it's like 6% of SKUs in Ontario have no sales within the last 60 days. So really trying to cut the fat and really focus on the ones that are driving revenue and growth at your store.
Yeah, Krista, I see you nodding. Thank you, Abby. I see you nodding. Tell me when Abby says those things about average overall number of SKUs that aren't moving, SKUs that are moving. Tell me what you're thinking about and how you're talking to retailers about that.
Yeah, I'm thinking about like a matrix crazy chalkboard with numbers all over it to be able to track kind of where this is going. So if you were to just try and pull this data alone without utilizing a platform that can make it more aggregate and viewable, it is really difficult. And so one of the things that happens, like Abby's saying, is that if you get to 6 months in and you have 6% of your SKUs that are not moving, hypothetically, let's call your inventory at $100,000 by the time we get to 6 months. That's like $6,000 worth of wholesale cost products that are not moving at all. Well, what could your business do if you reinvested that in better performing SKUs? So there is the strategy towards like starting lean and building up at the beginning. And then at 6 months, really taking a look and saying, where do I sit with my inventory? What are my best performing SKUs? And how does that vary based off of what I expected them to be? And then what can I do with that information in terms of where I should reinvest? Because I do it all the time. Your own biases really feed into what you think are your number one SKUs. And when we look into the data, it often doesn't match up perfectly. Most retailers have a good sense of what those products are, but when we dig into like actual efficiency for the revenue, as well as revenue from individual products, it often isn't the exact things we thought. And so having that information is really helpful when we go to make buying decisions moving past the 6 month mark.
Yeah. And Abby, I want to ask you a question, because obviously you're looking at it all the time. Your retailers are looking all the time. The data scientists at Headset are looking at it all the time. And, you know, it's important to be doing that, because certainly here in downtown, where I live in downtown Toronto, but larger in Ontario, larger in Canada, larger even in North America, is that things are opening back up. And I wonder if, I don't know the answer to this, but understanding that there may be changes to how people buy, consume, what they're buying, when they're buying, like understanding that like in real time and in sort of a rolling 60 days, I would imagine is something that a lot of Headset is looking at, but also a lot of Headset clients and customers.
Absolutely. It's a completely different experience going on a website rather than walking in a store, right? And going on a website, people can filter from the highest or lowest to highest price. They can look at specifically different attributes that they want, right? Whereas when you're walking into a retail store, somebody's greeting you, somebody's there to kind of sway your purchasing decision. The build out of the store, whether it looks beautiful like an Apple store or it looks like a log cabin, it really contributes to part of that experience, right? And I think the bud tenders and the education aspect of the cannabis industry is one of the, if not the most important aspect of it, especially for some of those people who maybe don't have a ton of experience with cannabis and aren't comfortable going on a website and just looking at pictures of, you know, like flowers and pre-rolls and that kind of thing, right? So it's a completely different experience. And part of the data from when we were in lockdown, where you could really only buy online, is being able to change where the products are appearing on your website. And rather than, I think Krista always talks about, like, rather than resorting to a discounting strategy and cutting off your profit margin, just try changing it in the store, try changing it as part of the customer experience and see what happens, right?
Yeah. And Chris, I actually want to ask you, because I mean, we are doing this opening up, but like thinking about the future and thinking about the data that Headset can provide a retailer, like what do you think will be important to look at from a retailer perspective as time marches on? Like, when do you think they want to access it? When do you think they want to make a decisions? What is the right horizon after you make a decision or a choice to like look back and reflect on it, specifically as it relates to like what cannabis products people should have in their sort of portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, I think that this space, specifically with cannabis products, which is different than accessories, which we talked about last time, is that you can purchase weekly, which there's very few industries around inventory that you can purchase weekly. So there's already an opportunity to set your cadence kind of like at a weekly check-in around your inventory. You want to be able to make decisions around specific products and measure how something is performing in that week, and then watch it and benchmark it against the next 2 to 3 weeks. 1 month in, we should be making some actions if we're not seeing product move fast enough. And then there's like a bit of a cadence in terms of actions that can happen. And Abby's totally right. Like, it doesn't need to be a discount right off the bat. There are promotions that can be done prior to that. And that doesn't even necessarily mean that there's special pricing, but it's also about the positionality of the product. And that gets linked to in-store and online and vice versa when we start to think about touch points. So with your cannabis inventory, when we present it in store, our goal should always be to try and connect more than one product together in a transaction. And so if you can benchmark that as a behavior, as well as take a look at what you're carrying online, as well as revisit kind of at a monthly cadence, a real deep dive into your inventory, you should be on a good case in terms of what your individual store needs to have in store, as well as where the product needs to be positioned to make those things happen together simultaneously.
Yeah. Abby, I want to sort of ask you, because not only are there a lot more stores than there were pre-COVID, almost everywhere, like everywhere there's legal cannabis, in Canada for sure, but even other places. Like there's more stores, there's also more SKUs. So there's like, there's I don't know if it's 3-dimensional chess, but it's a lot more to like 3-dimensional chess than everybody going onto the buy sheet, buying the same top 10 items, putting in their store, because they need to do that. Plus they need to compete with their neighbors. Plus they may know their customers a little bit better. And like, are you seeing your retailers sort of doing more nuanced dives into the data based on any or all of those factors? Sort of, I don't want to say post-COVID, that would imply that we're done with it, but like reopening or slight reopening in some places.
So you can, like, there's a lot of different, of course, so many different SKUs that are available at the OCS. And Krista touched on this earlier, is that these or the whoever's purchasing the product for their store does have some sort of a bias according to what they like, what they think others are going to like, right? But now really like 6 to 9 months down the road is when you start diving into that data and saying, okay, this is what I thought was going to sell really well. And it's not, it maybe is selling a little bit, but it's not contributing to our large part of revenue, right? So the whole idea around the Pareto principle, 20%, around 20% of your SKUs are going to contribute to about 80% of your sales. They really have to figure out what are those 20% of their SKUs. And when they're not available with the OCS, because sometimes they're out of stock, what are some substitutes for that? How can we sway the purchasing decisions of the people who are coming in looking for those specific products, right?
Yeah, I would add to that too. It's like, also when we have really new exciting products coming online, how do you decide how much to invest, when to invest? because we've got all these like great summer products that are about to launch. And so if you want to test them for your market, it's like, how do you do that with some kind of rigor behind knowing how much to invest and what actions to take to know whether it is warrants a reinvestment?
Yeah. I just saw a Freezies coming online. It can't be so.
That'll be fun for summer.
It sounds great. I don't know what the details are. I saw it, but I don't like, does it come not frozen? We'll get into that later, I'm sure. Abby and Christy, you're coming back for the next panel. We appreciate it. Thank you for this really deep dive, and we'll see you in a minute when we come back with the rest of the crew.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay.
Thank you.